stalking and harassment of the editor and publisher of an online newsletter at the hands of eBay employees.
6 eBay employees facing charges of cyberstalking and harassing a couple with deliveries of live cockroaches and other ominous things.
eBay tried to silence me with threats and intimidation.
Did it cross your mind at any point that eBay could be behind this?
No.
911, what's your emergency, please?
Someone is attempting to break into my garage.
Getting their garage door vandalized, David and Ina Steiner had no idea that their lives were about to become a nightmare. On the other side of this childish act were not teenagers, but one of the biggest corporations in the world, eBay. The Steiners, who ran a popular blog about e-commerce, had written a critical post about the company, igniting a fury that would soon turn their world upside down. Sitting in their office, the Steiners continued their work, unaware that eBay's top executives were losing their minds over the blog post. What seemingly started as only a joke would soon escalate into a nightmare. For months, David and Ina would endure a barrage of harassment, stalking, insults, alarming deliveries, and even death threats. This is the story of how a simple blog post led eBay's top executives to launch a campaign of terror, destroying the lives of a couple whose only crime was telling the truth. It was the late 1980s when Ina and David Steiner first met at university. It was love at first sight, and over 50 years later, they're still going strong. Their shared passion for antiquing might just be the secret to their long-lasting relationship. For many years, their favorite hobby was finding that rare gem at the flea markets. Wandering around trying to come up with treasures among other people's old stuff was a real passion. But everything changed in 1995, when a technological revolution came into their lives: Auction Web. Auction Web was a revolutionary site where anyone could sell items, place bids, and essentially create their own marketplace. For a couple who spent most of their weekends hunting for bargains at flea markets across the country, this platform promised endless opportunities to find treasures right from their home. For them, there was no doubt that this was where they needed to be. This was surely the future of antiquing. And they weren't the only ones to see the potential of this new site, as it grew fast. In fact, it grew so fast that eventually it became known by a slightly more familiar name: eBay. By the late 90s, many people were still uneasy with using computers. This gave David and Ina a brilliant idea. They decided to create a blog dedicated to online commerce to help people understand how it worked, how to buy and sell items, and report on key trends in the industry. In 1999, they launched Auction Bites. The blog quickly gained popularity thanks in part to a newsletter that covered the latest in the industry. They wrote guides, marketplace news, forums, articles, newsletters, and they even had a TV segment named Auction Bites TV, where Ina discussed e-commerce on her own channel. It was so successful that David and Ina were able to make a living from their passion, thanks to the advertising revenue generated by the site's traffic. From simple bargain hunters, they had become the heads of their own small business, all from the comfort of their home. Fast forward 10 years, and they are now running a successful business with established relationships with communication teams of several e-commerce sites, including eBay. This allowed them to obtain exclusive information and share it with their audience. They also became advocates for sellers, regularly highlighting various bugs and technical problems, and contacting eBay on behalf of these sellers to ensure their issues were addressed. Typically, eBay responded and resolved problems promptly. However, in 2008, Ina received an email from eBay's then Director of Communications, Jose Malabo. He bluntly stated that while they had been cooperative in the past, they would no longer address every technical issue as it was too time-consuming, while also hinting that it was harming their reputation. Ina was surprised, since this email came after a decade of reporting, but she remained professional. She thanked him for clarifying his position and invited him to comment publicly on the bugs they shared. Not long after, the couple published a new article titled, "eBay Launches Feedback Extortion Policy." But this time, Malabo did something very strange. He first left a comment under his own name, as he usually did, but he then decided to leave another comment under a fake pseudonym, John Rathert. The comment said, "You and David are about as big a joke as there is. Go write about the fuzz in your navels." Unfortunately for him, he used the same IP address for both comments, which David quickly noticed. He called him out by his real name, explaining he knew exactly who he was. Everyone in the comments section started mocking eBay. In 2009, they discovered another eBay executive creating fake profiles on their site, repeatedly criticizing their methods. The goal was clearly to discredit them in front of their readers. This petty war escalated. In 2012, eBay filed a complaint directly with the Steiners' web host, claiming the blog was a phishing site. This was a strange move and ultimately pointless because it was obvious there was no phishing involved. eBay withdrew their complaint to avoid looking petty, but it was a bit too late as everyone saw what they had done and how petty, in fact, they were. But these kinds of intimidation tactics worried David and Ina. While the complaint itself was baseless, it made them think about the potential consequences if things had escalated further. It could have put an end to everything they had built over the years. Despite this weird Cold War with eBay, David and Ina stayed objective in their reporting about the company, whether good or bad. They continued to reach out to eBay's communication team when needed, even though the team had been ordered to never respond to their inquiries again. So, life went on for everyone. But a decade later, things took a dramatic turn. On January 22, 2019, Ina wrote a new article with a rather provocative title, "Activist Investor Eviscerates eBay Management." This article referred to a scathing letter sent to the board of eBay by hedge fund Elliott Management, a large shareholder. They had publicly criticized eBay's policies and declared that the company's leadership was a mess. The article quickly gained traction, with many users of the site chiming in with criticism of the company and its management. One user in particular stood out. A person with the username Fidomaster responded, laying out the hedge fund's plans and critiquing the CEO at the time, Devin Wenig. And this didn't go unnoticed. Far from it. Devin Wenig was absolutely furious when he discovered it on Steiner's site. Despite being a multi-millionaire CEO, Wenig couldn't ignore a simple blog by an elderly woman and a comment by an anonymous internet user. Wenig was genuinely worried about getting ousted by his shareholders. If this blog post stirred things up, others might join the dissent. So he called his most loyal ally, his chief of communications, Steve Weimer. They discussed how to handle the situation, but instead of trying to calm things down, they went into a full-scale war. They needed to shut Ina Steiner and her followers down. The order was clear: crush this woman at all costs. Thus, a war machine was set in motion within eBay's security division with one goal: neutralize the Steiners' blog by any means necessary. And what better way than some good old-fashioned intimidation? At least, that's what eBay thought. In June 2019, Brian Gilbert, senior manager of security operations at eBay, was dispatched to Boston, where David and Ina live. Armed with a can of spray paint, he covered their gate with the message, "Fidomaster, you will die." Yes, a tech giant had just vandalized the home of a couple in their 50s. Take a moment to reflect on that. But this wasn't enough for Weimer. Oh no, he didn't stop there. In text messages to his team, he said, "She is a biased troll who needs to get burned down." In the following weeks, David and Ina were targeted by anonymous Twitter accounts accusing their site of ruining the careers of numerous sellers. They started receiving hundreds of grotesque newsletters, subscriptions to satanic churches, and fetish sites in their email. In August 2019, David received a call from a store in Arizona informing him they couldn't deliver his wet specimen. You might be wondering, what exactly is a wet specimen? Well, it turns out that this refers to a pig fetus.
Got a phone call from a shop in Arizona that said that they couldn't deliver the wet specimen that we had ordered. And not having any idea what a wet specimen was, I asked her. She said it was an embalmed pig fetus.
Without hesitation, David hung up and called the police. He refused to endure what seemed to be a relentless harassment campaign any longer. A patrol arrived and took their statements immediately. By sheer coincidence, just as the officers were about to leave, a delivery driver knocked and dropped off a package. Inside, they found a bloody pig mask straight out of the movie Saw. That night, David and Ina likely experienced one of the worst nights of their lives. Ina, in particular, struggled to cope with the situation and became obsessed with it. David did his best to console her, telling her that unfortunately this was part of being online and that there would always be malicious people out there. He insisted that this shouldn't stop them from doing the work they love. But then, David received another package addressed to him. An Amazon box containing a book carefully wrapped in bubble wrap. The book's title was Grief: Surviving the Loss of Your Spouse. What could have been considered extreme trolling until then seemed to have transformed into a real death threat against his wife. At this point, David and Ina took drastic measures, deciding to live completely barricaded in their home. The situation became so dire that they even slept in separate rooms, not because they couldn't stand each other, but in case something happened during the night. This way, one could hear the other's screams and call for help. Ina even set up traps, placing pots and cooking pans above doors and windows, so if someone tried to enter, the objects would fall and wake them up. David spent his nights doing rounds and monitoring the external cameras around their house. Paranoia had taken over the Steiners completely. Unfortunately, the harassment didn't stop there. The obscene calls and deliveries continued without interruption. One day, Ina received a call from a sex shop, informing her that her application to open a franchise had been approved. Another day, David received a package, and when he opened it, he realized it was filled with live cockroaches and spiders. One time, a man came and left a funeral urn and flowers at their doorstep, clearly another death threat. Then, there was the time a neighbor came over holding an adult magazine that had been delivered to him. The magazine was in David's name, but had been intentionally sent to the neighbor to humiliate the Steiners. Intimidating David and Ina wasn't enough. Their harassers wanted to shame them in front of their entire neighborhood. Fed up, the Steiners switched into investigative journalist mode. They meticulously documented every call and delivery, gathering as much information as possible to identify the source. But every time they contacted the responsible parties, they were told that no one would cooperate. Finally, the unknown threat that had been looming for months materialized. One day, while David was out buying a new surveillance camera, he noticed a black SUV with out-of-state plates following him. He remembered seeing this SUV before, so David decided to change his route, taking several improbable detours to lose his tail. But the SUV remained behind him. David tried to take a photo of the license plate before speeding away and hiding in an alley. He managed to lose the SUV and immediately went to the police station. The police, already familiar with his case, agreed to run the license plate. However, the last digit of the plate was blurry. Despite David's plea to check just 10 possible numbers to get a lead, the police refused. Without a complete license plate, they wouldn't investigate. Frustrated, David returned home and resumed his routine of patrolling the house at 4 a.m., watching the live feed from his cameras, unable to think about anything else. One night, while monitoring the street outside, he saw an SUV parking in front of the house. It was impossible for him to tell if it was the same one that followed him last time, but a man gets out with a large black bag and heads straight for the house. Panic sets in. David shouts for the man to stop, to drop the bag immediately. Surprisingly, the man complied, placed the bag down, and quickly left. After a couple long minutes of staring at the bag, David cautiously approached, fearing the worst. When he opened it, he found a pizza box inside. Upon opening the box, he sees an actual pizza. It was just a prank call to deliver a pizza to his house in the middle of the night. The delivery man, not a stalker or assassin, must have been bewildered by David's outburst. Despite this tension, David and Ina's harassment continued and the police showed no real motivation to help. The relentless Twitter account that had been tormenting them for months kept taunting them. The account even asked if they had received its gifts, which included regular deliveries of boxes filled with live insects, bags of coffee, and fake party invitations, some even suggesting orgies at their address. Nonetheless, the couple remained steadfast, but David still had to leave the house for groceries. One day while driving, he noticed an SUV in his rearview mirror following him again. This time, David managed to take a clear photo of the license plate, ensuring all the numbers were legible. Instead of trying to lose the SUV, he decided to set a trap. He pretended to flee but headed straight for the police station. The driver of the SUV realized the ruse and turned away at the last moment. David parked and rushed inside, ignoring questions from the police. All he cared about was the photo on his phone, which he showed to the officers. With all the digits this time, the police were more inclined to help and ran it through their system. They discovered it was a rental car under the name Veronica Z, a name that initially meant nothing to David and Ina. However, the police found a crucial piece of information. Veronica worked for eBay. This revelation was shocking for the Steiners and would lead the police to uncovering more people involved. By examining messages, the officers discovered that it wasn't just this one eBay employee involved, it was an entire team. Amongst the team was David Harville, a military veteran who was at the time Director of Global Resiliency at eBay, and James Bowe, a Senior Director of Safety and Security. Working under the leadership of Weimer, they instructed their staff to harass and terrorize the Steiners. The case suddenly became much larger and was immediately handed over to the FBI. From that point, things moved quickly. David and Ina were stunned. They never imagined eBay could be capable of something so evil and bizarre. They thought they were dealing with a lone stalker or an angry reader, but this was beyond comprehension. A few weeks later, the team at eBay received notices from the US Department of Justice advising them to contact lawyers immediately. Panic began to set in among the group. The higher-ups instructed staff to delete everything from their phones and prepare for the upcoming interrogations, with orders to do anything they can to derail the investigation. Besides dealing with law enforcement, they would also have to face eBay's legal teams, who were not going to be on their side upon discovering their actions. Anticipating the storm, the entire security team involved was fired, including Steve Weimer. Devin Wenig, the CEO, resigned shortly after, citing differences with the board of directors.
The departure of eBay CEO Devin Wenig, stepping down as the company's president and CEO, immediately replaced by the CFO. A search for a new successor commences as well. Pretending as if everything was fine. Wenig left with a hefty severance package of over $50 million. On June 15, 2020, the Massachusetts Attorney General officially announced legal proceedings against several eBay employees. The investigation revealed that the very CEO of eBay had targeted the Steiners. The evidence showed explicit messages discussing the desire to destroy their site and ruin their lives. The team at eBay frantically scrapped to destroy evidence and cover their tracks once they realized the police were involved. They deleted compromising messages and emails in an attempt to escape prosecution. eBay's management instructed the team to hand over their work phones and not to tamper with anything, but it was quickly discovered that everything had been factory reset. Unluckily for Bowe and Harville, the police recovered messages clearly instructing their staff to delete everything from your phones or we're all going to be fired. Another mistake included using easily traceable rental cars paid with the company card. These errors led the police to numerous other clues, confirming each individual's involvement. Ironically, this security team included former police officers who likely believed they were smarter than the current investigators.
The investigation also revealed that the team wasn't done with the Steiners. Bo and Harville had been in the process of acquiring equipment to break into the couple's garage and install GPS trackers on their cars. In court, their charges included harassment, stalking, and attempting to destroy evidence, but most importantly, a constitutional offense of trying to silence journalists. The 7 other eBay employees who were engaged in the scheme were also indicted. Bo, the former security director, received a 5-year prison sentence, as well as 2 years of supervised release and a $40,000 fine. David Harville was sentenced to 2 years in prison and 2 years of supervised release, as well as a $20,000 fine. The rest of the team received various sentences, including fines and time in prison. However, as is usually the case, those really responsible managed to escape unscathed. As mentioned, Wenig left eBay with a substantial severance package and is now on the board of directors at General Motors. GM dismissed the affair as regrettable but irrelevant to them. Steve Weimer, despite being fired, quickly landed a prestigious job as the president of the Boys and Girls Club of Silicon Valley, an organization that runs summer activities for children. They apparently saw no issue with hiring someone who had tried to ruin the lives of an elderly couple. On the contrary, they confirmed being aware of the affair, but insisted that it didn't prevent Weimer from being a leader of integrity. Of course, all 12 defendants claimed they simply didn't know. They said that if they had been alerted in time, they would have done everything to stop this dark episode. The rest of eBay's leadership defended themselves, stating that they never authorized such an operation and had never heard of it, which is actually possible. Despite this, the company was still found liable for and paid a $3 million fine.
eBay will pay a $3 million fine to settle criminal charges after former employees launched a cyber-stalking campaign against a Natick couple.
Some employees publicly admitted their wrongdoing. Veronica, the first to be identified by the police, expressed deep regret for her involvement. She defended herself by saying she was only 23 and manipulated by her superiors. She was the one who handled the dirty work, spying on the Steiners, lying to the police and eBay's lawyer before being unceremoniously fired. As for David and Ina, they continue to live in fear of hearing their doorbell or seeing a delivery person. However, one thing that never wavered through all this was their dedication to their site. Every day, as usual, Ina continues to write articles for what is now known as e-commerce bites, and she has no plans to stop anytime soon. Which is quite admirable considering everything they've been through. If you liked this video, click here to watch the story of Monsanto, the company that poisoned the world, and subscribe for more videos like these.